Welcome to this Backspace lab on DynamoDB. In this lab we're just going to run through some of the features of DynamoDB, and we're going to get our hands on the service, and we're going to create a table in DynamoDB, and we're going to add items to that table, and we're going to add attributes to those items. We're first going to start off using the console to do that. But what we'll find is that is quite tedious and not suitable for managing large amounts of data. So what we're going to look at is using the command line interface to import data in JSON format and use batch write to bring that into our DynamoDB table. Once we've done that, we can look at also using the command line interface to query that data as well, and to get information out of that data. And again, we'll use the JSON format in a file to make that quite quick. So first thing we want to do is to jump into the DynamoDB console, and then we want to click on Create Table. So we're just going to call this Test Table, and I'm not going to go into the details of hash and range and hash and everything. That's fully covered off previously in the course. If you don't understand it, go back. There's a lot of material there, good material that we've provided for you to understand that. This is all about getting your hands on and actually using it with Amazon Web Services console. So first thing we want to do here is we're going to create a hash and a number. So we just call that ID for our hash attribute name, and then we continue on. So we've created there a hash with number ID. So every item in this table will have an ID attribute. So I'm just going to add also here a global secondary index. So the first thing we're going to add in there is a product category, and that will be a string for the product category, and we're also going to have a number there for the price as well. Okay, so we'll just add that index to the table, and there we can see we've created a global secondary index. The index hash key is product category, which is a string, and the range key is price, which is a number, and then it's given it an index name there as well. So we'll just continue with that. And we'll just keep continuing till we get that. We won't use any alarms on this, just for this lab, and we'll continue till it's done. So this is a review. Our costs are going to be incurred with that, $1 a month. We should be able to afford that. And create. And there it's creating, and we will refresh, and it will eventually become active, which it has there now. Okay, so now that we've created our table, we can go in and start adding items to that table, and then adding attributes to those items that we add. So let's click on Explore Table. Once we're in there, we can click on Create Item to add an item to that table. So what we've got here is that we already have some attributes already set up. So we know that there's always going to be an ID attribute there, and also product category and price, because we've already defined that previously in our secondary index and our keys. So first of all, we'll put in there for ID of 101. The product category would be book for this one, and we're just going to put in a strange price of -2 in there. So now we're just going to start adding the other attributes to this item. So we're just going to click on here, and we have a number of selections there. So we're going to append. We're going to add to the end of this a string, and that's going to be title, the title attribute they're going to put in there, and then we're going to put in the title of Book 101 title. Okay, so just fast forwarding there, I've just completed the rest of the attributes there. So just when you put them in the same format again, just append, and then you select what it's supposed to be, whether it's Boolean, string, or whatever. And just make sure you have that right. So you've got a string for this, you've got a number for that, a Boolean for that. When that looks right, you can click on Save and save that. Okay. Now we can go into Browse Items, and we can refresh that. Let's refresh. Explore. And there we have it. So we've just got our first item added to that table. And there we can see authors, authors 1, ID, dimensions, and everything looks fine there. Okay, so that's a very slow way of adding items, a very inefficient way of adding items to a table. So that would be okay if you just wanted to modify a table, you wanted to add a couple of items or delete a few items or whatever, you would go into the console and you'd do that. That's quite feasible to do that. But if you're bringing in large amounts of data, you definitely wouldn't do that. So if you've got a few hundred items or thousands of items to come in, that's not going to be practical at all. So the way you would do that is to import the data through using a batch write command, and you would import that data as a JSON file, which would contain all the details of those items, and you would use the batch write command in one of the SDKs or else with the command line interface tools. So we're going to use the command line interface tools to import quite a number of items, and we're going to have a look at that. So first thing I'll do is just open up that actual file, the JSON file, and we can see exactly what that looks like. So quite straightforward. So we've got here the first object there is test table, and that's the name of our table, obviously. And then we go into the different items here. So we've got the one there, and then the next one here. So a put request there for an item with an ID of that, a title of that, which is going to have a string. That's a string, and then we have a authors, which is an array of strings, and then we've got all that there and a boolean there for in publication. And that goes all the way down there till we get to the end. So quite straightforward and easy to understand. One thing you might realise there just by looking at that is it's really not any easier than using the command line, using the console, and you're quite correct there. But where this is an advantage is if, for example, you're using an Excel worksheet, you can actually have a cell set up with this part of it in a cell, this text, and then the next cell would have the data, and then another cell with the text, and then at the end of the row you would have that all concatenated together to create your JSON object there. So, and then you would just go line by line adding them all through, and you could also basically automate that straight to bring in large amounts of data and then and create a JSON file. So once you've got that in Excel, you'd cut and paste that and you'd bring it into a JSON editor to check that it's okay. So I'm just going to grab all of this now and bring that into a JSON editor. So if you've got Chrome, there is a really good Chrome extension called JSON Editor. It's free and it installs straight into your Chrome browser. So we're just going to launch that one now. And I'll just clear the screen. So I'm just going to paste that in there now, the JSON, and just going to click here and bring it over to the other side here. So it's interpreted all that JSON and it's got it in here. We've got the object test table, and which has all these items added to it. So the first item is going to be a request there for the item there with an ID of 102, which we've got 102 there, which is a number, all the way down to product category, which is a book. We'll look at the last item in here, which has an ID of 205, and we go down here 205. So that looks pretty good. So the other advantage of doing this is that you obviously pick up errors. So just say, for example, you leave out a comma there, and then you go to bring that across, it'll come up with an error telling you that. So it's really quite handy to sort out problems before you actually get anywhere near your database and create havoc in your database. The other advantage is that when you get this sort of data out of a spreadsheet, it's normally very hard to read and very hard to find out what's going on. So what you can do is once you've got it over and interpreted it here, you can bring it back across and it'll sort that all out and format that all nicely for you. So that's quite a good tool to use. Okay, so we're just going to use the command line interface now to bring that JSON file, which is located on inside an S3 bucket, into Amazon Web Services to upload to DynamoDB. So if you're having trouble getting these command line interface tools working, there's three things you probably need to check. So you need to download the MSI file and then do the Windows installer. It's probably the easiest way to do it for Windows. There's other ways of doing it for Linux and Mac, but the process is pretty well the same. So once it's been installed, then you need to set up your path in your environment variables inside Windows to make sure that you can access that from any directory. You next need to do the AWS Configure Command and make sure that you have an access key and secret access key there set up to go in there. You also need to make sure that you check that the user that you're using has administrator access set up in IAM. So if that's all done, then everything should be working properly. So the first thing you would want to do would be to do that AWS Configure command. I won't do that now. I've already done that. So that'll go through and ask you what your secret access key and everything is. So what we're going to do now is use a command here. It's a batch write command, and it's going to pull in from a bucket here that we've the backspace CDN, and it's going to pull that in, interpret it, and then bring it into the DynamoDB table that's referred to in that JSON file. So we just click on Enter now, and that will chug away, and that's finished. So there is a command, or there is a message saying unprocessed items, which means it's processed everything that's supposed to be done there. So now if we go back into the DynamoDB console, we should be able to see all of those items brought into that table. So we just click on again Explore Table and go for Query. And there we can see everything has been brought in quite nicely. So we've got our books here, which don't have bicycle type or brand or anything, which is fine, but they have authors and dimensions and whatever. And up here we have our bike. So it's pulled in those 9 items out of that JSON file quite successfully and with no errors. So that was very quick and easy to do. Okay, so now that we've got that data in there, let's have a look at querying and get some information out of that data. So what we're going to do is maybe look at getting all of the bikes that are less than or equal to $300. So we've basically got this one, 3 out of the 5 bikes are less than $300. So that's probably a good query to start with. So what we'll do is have a look at the JSON file that I've set up for that. So here we go. So it's again very simple to understand. It's just got 2 main objects here. So product category is going to be a string bike, makes sense, and the price is going to be $300 with a comparison operator of less than or equal to. So anything that's less than or equal to 300, that is a bike that equals bike. It will pull that in. So there's our JSON file, and the command to do that is a query command. So there we can see we've got our JSON file, and with the conditions there to bring it in, and we're going to just run that command and see what happens. Okay, so it's spat out some objects for us. Let's have a look at those. So the first one is 201, and that has a price of $100. So that's correct. The next one is a bike, 202, and that is priced $200. The next one, bike 203, is priced $300, which again is less than or equal to 300, and that's it. So we've got 3, and everything worked fine. So we've covered off quite a bit there. So hopefully you get a good understanding now of how useful the command line tools are. And using the command line tools is very similar to using an SDK if you are a programmer. So you get used to using that. And if you are a coder, then you can do some great stuff with this. So now it's your turn to have a go at this. So all the files there are ready for you to go, so you can download the JSON files, have a look at them, see how they work, play around with the command line tools yourself, maybe do some queries yourself, and play around with that. So I'll see you in the next lesson.